for joining us. It's really great for you all to take the time to kind of lend your insights and have students be able to get a sense of what they might expect when going into their own experiences, and they can learn from previous folks that have worked with you all. So I'll make a quick introduction. My name is Melissa Loupeda. I'm a Cardinal Quarter peer advisor. So I help students kind of navigate their way of finding internships. And we're really excited to have you all here to help students with the next part, which is finding out how to actually navigate those internships, especially considering our Zoom environment and the difficulties that presents. So if you could all introduce yourselves, Jackie will unmute you all, and so you guys have an opportunity to say where you're coming from, which firm, and perhaps just a tidbit about yourself. So we'll get started on that.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. So my name's Jackie O'Neill. I am also a Cardinal Quarter peer advisor. I'm going to go ahead and unmute or ask to unmute each of our panelists. And as Melissa said, if you could just tell the attendees your name, what organization you're representing, and then perhaps what your interns typically do, whether that's research, app development, community outreach, et cetera, some combination of all of those things or something else. Yeah, so we'll get started here.
I guess I'm starting. My name's Jonathan Levy. I'm the Deputy Chief Economist at the U.S. Federal Communications Commission in Washington, located in something called the Office of Economics and Analytics. And I dare say that unless a Stanford student on this call took many gap years before matriculating, I was happy to welcome our first Stanford intern before any of you were born. It's been a long and mutually beneficial relationship, which we're happy that we're going to be continuing this summer with Sarah Bitter. And basically, we're a policy research office, economic policy research. And mostly what our interns do is, well, they do a couple of things: quantitative work, collection, cleaning, and statistical analysis of data, as well as some other types of activities revolving around reading and critiquing comments that public parties, interested parties, submit in FCC proceedings. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We'll go to.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Javier Aguirre, and I'm the Director of the Office of Reentry Services for the County of Santa Clara. So Reentry Services is, right now we provide services to those that are being released from our county jails, both at Elmwood and Milpitas and the main jail in downtown San Jose. And then we also support those that are being released from state prison. And so we have a center in San Jose. Typically, I would always say pre-COVID-19, we would see 100 people. And now we see between 20 and 30. We still see clients that come into our center. And then we also have a center in Gilroy, just south of San Martin. So we have those two centers. And so we see about 5,000 people annually, folks that are coming out of our prison system and jail system. We also work with clients that are in custody. So we've been doing that. I've been in this role for now 6 years. And our fellows, so usually they help us with triaging clients at our registration at the Reentry Center, so they get to talk to the clients as they show up and assess their needs. We also have them clear to go to the jail to do focus groups and surveys. And then they do follow-up meetings with our clients. So in between research, I always like them to be part of the face-to-face interaction and kind of also assess their comfort level to see if they want to meet with the clients and provide that service. And then also attend meetings with policymakers. So we have a fellow that's going to be starting in late June. So we're looking at how we're going to do most of his fellowship remotely. But this is an opportune opportunity with everything that's going on with racial disparities in our county jail system, police brutality. I have a list of projects that he'll be helping with my staff and others as we just deal with all the events that are happening around us. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Wentworth. I work for California Education Partners. It's a nonprofit located in San Francisco and Oakland that supports collaboration in the education sector. This will be the 4th summer we've hosted a Haas Fellow. And generally that student helps us with our research practice partnership program. We support 3 partnerships, with 2 with Stanford University and local school districts, San Francisco Unified School District, and then a network of 9 neighboring districts close to campus. And then the partnership between UC Berkeley and Oakland Unified. And typically each summer we have the student work on 3 buckets of work, some of which is analyzing qualitative data, looking at across our meeting notes from meetings with researchers and practitioners. We have them build policy briefs for us that are summarizing research. And then we usually try to give them some hands-on experience working with and interacting with the people that are working on our research projects in some way, shape, or form. And we will do that all this summer virtually with our summer intern.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm George Clement, co-founder and executive director at JustFix.nyc. So we are a tenants' rights nonprofit based in New York City. And our particular work is focused on supporting the tenants' rights movement in New York City and beyond with various digital services and data and sort of technology projects. So we have had a couple of fellows in the past few years that have been really, really fantastic, supporting both on the technology side, so working with data, working with sort of software engineering projects, and then we've also had fellows support with slightly more kind of policy and program oriented aspects of our work. Right now, it's going to be a very interesting summer of work. We've, similarly to some of the other entities represented, had a lot on our plate in response to the coronavirus, and have a couple of projects to support renters that are struggling with being able to cover rent, as well as folks that are, sort of sheltered in place, but in shelters that don't have great conditions. And so how do we support that community as well? So lots of interesting work to happen this summer, and we're excited to have the support of a fellow.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. That's great. So we have representation, as people have seen, from everywhere from local government to federal government and like tech sector, et cetera. So that's really great. So just so people know that are joining us, please feel free to plug in questions into the chat box. We'll be getting into those after we go through our first initial set of questions. So to begin, we wanted to know if a past intern has ever made a particularly good or bad first impression on you, and if so, what do they do? So anyone can go ahead and take that first.
I'm happy to go. The very first fellow we had done their research on our organization and pretty much read everything we put out ahead of time, and had very specific things he wanted to accomplish professionally based on the work of what we do. So our goal is to help researchers and practitioners work together, and in hopes that it produces useful research, but also research that has an impact on the decisions that school district leaders are making. And this intern, or this fellow, really wanted to understand the social network and the interactions. And he called that out very early on, and so we were able to make a plan for him to tackle that.
So I'll give sort of a hokey answer to the question. So no one has really made a bad impression. Let me just put that out front. And part of the reason probably is that, as you know, the students selected for this Cardinal Quarter are carefully evaluated by you, and we appreciate that function, and we appreciate being presented each year with a short list of people, all of whom are really good. And we do our own individual evaluation before finalizing the arrangement. And we've learned over really, I've been doing this for decades, and I think my colleagues and I have sort of learned to do a reasonably good evaluation. The one thing I will say, however, and I think it's particularly relevant for the format of the relationship this summer, the virtual format, is that you have to be a bit gregarious and a bit of sort of a self-starter, shall we say. And I think the people who make not just a good, but a sort of a super good impression, are people who are self-confident and independent and willing to engage with their colleagues. And in particular, and this is going to be especially important this summer, willing to speak up if they're uncertain about something. I mean, when I can walk to your cubicle 5 times a day, I'm going to get a pretty quick impression about if you need some additional advice, if there's an uncertainty, or perhaps some instructions were not given as clearly as they could have been. On the other hand, if you're 3,000 miles away from me, and I'm calling you a couple of times a week, and my colleagues are calling you a couple of times a week, it's not the same. So we're gonna have to depend on people to be sort of self-confident enough to reach out to us if in the middle of a day or whatever a question comes up. And I can elaborate a little bit later on, sort of on the personal qualities, in addition to the sort of academic and technical qualities that we're looking for.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I have to agree with Jonathan in terms of the caliber and the talent of all of our fellows that worked in the past. And one that comes to my mind was her research on women incarcerated and those women that have children. So she already kind of knew the research she wanted to do. So we were able to fit her in terms of our survey and our work, which led her to do her thesis. And then a year later, she came back and made this fabulous presentation to my staff and our providers about her findings. So I think she even took the next steps in terms of continuing engaging us. I think that is worthy to let folks know how we value their work, but also that they use that work to help them in their studies, and then for them to continue being part of our work and our research.
Yeah, absolutely. I parlayed my Cardinal Quarter experience into my thesis topic as well. So it's definitely a really valuable option. Our next question kind of hits on preparation, which is, what should interns be doing now in the weeks before their internship starts to prepare for the job?
I'm happy to go. And I think this actually relates to like making the best first impression, because the summer goes by so quickly. And so if you can start some of the prep work and sort of some pre-readings and some context before coming into the role can be really, really helpful. And I would put that in sort of maybe 3 buckets. So one is information about the space in general. And I found that most people are going into organizations that are related to their studies, and so they have pretty good context there, although there can always be sort of more specific information to review. Another is information about the organization itself. And it's sort of like, in any good like interview process, you should be an expert in what they do. that can be really, really helpful. And also understanding like who the people are that you'll be working with. That can really impress people, right? If staff members, when you're doing your introductory, coffee or now, Zoom call, if you know a little bit about their background, that's going to really, really impress folks. And the third thing I would say is more skills-based. And this will be slightly different for different roles. For us, in technical roles, this involves actually could be more than a week of prep work, but the whole semester leading up, thinking about what are the tech stacks that are used and how can you supplement the CS education with some practical web development tutorials and that kind of thing. So I would put it in those three buckets, and it can be so helpful in getting the most out of the summer for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Love to hear from anyone else on this as well.
Well, let me give kind of a contrarian perspective here. We're extremely grateful for the hard and extensive work that our Stanford interns and others have provided. And in a way, I think it's almost unfair to ask people to devote a significant amount of time before they've actually arrived, virtually or physically on the scene. So we don't assign a substantial amount of advanced reading or preparation. I agree very much with George, and it goes all the way back to the sort of the interview process. You should have some awareness of who we are and what we do, and be able to explain in a credible and slightly, at least somewhat informed way, why you're interested. And I mean, people who don't have that generally, they don't necessarily advance to the next round with us anyway. So I almost take that sort of initial level of engagement as a given. What I'm much more concerned about is, are people willing to sort of step up and learn new things on the job? And when our interns start, on the first day, even before they have access to our computer network, which unfortunately for bureaucratic reasons takes a day or so sometimes just to get up and running, we have provided reading material and other background material from public sources, and we expect them to dive right into it. And frankly, that's enough. That's enough for us. The willingness to really immediately step right into the tasks at hand, the willingness to expand or learn new skills, say particularly technical skills. I mentioned a lot of our work involves statistical analysis, so this sometimes involves improving on the fly one's skills with a particular statistical package, or sometimes even learning a new one. And people who can do that, they say that's good enough for us, and we're grateful, without asking them to put in a huge amount of time before they've joined us.
Great, thanks everyone. And on that note, just on a kind of practical, for students, tidbit that you can do in terms of preparation is simply, in my experience, doing Google News alerts, just putting in the name of your firm or particular players in your firm, and then getting that sent to you each morning before you go into the office. It can already inform the conversations that you have that day and can go along. So thank you, everyone. The next question we have are, what methods of communication have been working for you all in the online environment? And maybe on that note, how do you expect your interns to communicate with you?
I can share something we did before, which we'll do again this summer, and then how it will probably work in the online environment. So we make a weekly plan for the fellow, and which have clear deliverables at the end of each week. And we work on this the first week that they're there. And then on Friday, the fellow sends us the deliverable or sends us the update on the progress. And I expect we'll do that via email again. And then we meet on a weekly basis, which I assume we'll just do over Zoom again. But I find that document, that kind of scope of work and the clear deliverables really helps guide the work, even if, like Jonathan said, we're not able to walk down the hall at the cubicle and say, hey, how's it going? And we'll our organization uses Slack to communicate, so we'll probably integrate the person into that. You know, this is our normal channel of communication for our organization, and just get them accustomed to that so that they can ask quick questions when they want to.
I think for us is continuing, I'll concur with Laura. So all of my fellows have that weekly completion list, we call it, from Monday, and then we check in on Friday. And for the county, so we've been tossing between Zoom, Skype, and Microsoft Teams. So now the county is pushing us to do Microsoft Teams, especially if we're sharing confidential information about clients. We cannot no longer use Zoom or Skype. So that's something I need to work with our fellow in making sure. And then we have regular staff meetings in our office. So he'll join our staff meetings. And then there's a lot of public meetings that he'll be listening to at the board level and at local level. So those will be very beneficial. So we'll have a calendar of all the milestones. And with so much going on and us doing remote, we're still doing some work in person. But in this case, all his work will be remotely. But he'll be able to access any of my staff, either email or phone.
So our projects are a little bit less highly structured. We don't have it, perhaps it's a reflection on our own lack of complete organizational competence, but we don't really have week by week deliverables. But we do a variety of things. I mean, our Stanford fellow will be working on multiple projects, and each of those projects has one or more supervisors. And what we have set up a schedule of is someone's going to call our intern every day, each day, just to get sort of an informal, again, not with necessarily a specific deliverable, informal progress report. We expect people to reach out to us, as I've already mentioned, by phone or by email, with questions or whatever interim reports. And the other thing we do, we also can't use Zoom officially, but the social structure of our office has, in addition to work, relied fairly extensively on lunch. So we have a Zoom lunch that people can come to Monday through Friday, again, off your personal device and not using anything, a platform that requires any sort of security. And a lot of things happen at these lunches, political conversation, humorous conversation, personal conversation, but also a certain amount of business gets transacted as well. So being able to sort of be a fluent communicator across multiple platforms is a great skill to have. And honestly, pretty much everybody who's come to us has been good at that, and we appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we had a really great question from Ava, who's in the audience, and she asks, have you ever had a fellow continue with you in a second internship or in a full-time position after the summer-long fellowship? Why would you take an intern on as an extension, or why would you not?
So I had two occasions where a fellow came back, and one was to finish a project that unfortunately we couldn't finish. It was, we had a date to go into the jail to do the surveys, but that got postponed after her fellowship ended. So she came back and did some more work. So we coordinated that. And then another fellow did more extensive work, and that was the individual that was doing her thesis. So she wanted to do more focus groups, interact with our clients and our partners. So we allowed her to come back as an intern, still unpaid. That was unpaid, and then for her just to finish that. So that was valuable for us because she already knew the system, and we felt comfortable with her in terms of re-engaging our staff and then all of our providers. So we'll work with the student if they still want to continue doing some research or projects. We value their talent, and it's always good to have that support in any effort.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, sorry, go ahead.
I could just add, we haven't hired on one of our students afterwards. Most of them have been like juniors, or they've been going on. But when they really do ask for letters of rec, and I continue to be called on a regular basis for the 3 I've had. It looks like Jonathan's nodding his head. And just for whatever job change, they seem to come back to this experience. So there's a lot of talk and advice around careers generally during the summer. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think that a lot of our fellows do end up doing extended projects or theses in areas related to their summer experience, and it might not cross their mind to ask to reconnect with their organization and to partner with them on that front. But I think that it's never a bad idea to ask, and it can be really invaluable for those projects to have some sort of hands-on experience that dovetails with that nicely.
Awesome. And on that note as well to students is that often when you've done a fellowship, your supervisors will remember you. I think we sometimes get caught up in the university mindset of when something's done, you just kind of put it away and check box it, but people remember you, especially if you've done a good job. So even beyond kind of career, just for yourself to know where your project ended up, it's a great idea to check in. So the next question we have is if you have, or do you have advice for networking within the organization over the summer? It was mentioned, communication is going to be a challenge. So networking goes along with that. Any tips or tricks?
I would say you have to sort of push for it. I think what I've found, even just with staff within the organization right now, those casual, informal conversations that happen typically around the water cooler, so to speak, right, in the kitchen or getting lunch, those can't happen. And so people, even across teams, it's really difficult if they don't have a lot of regular scheduled formal check-in time. And so we've encouraged a buddy system so that folks match up and it's not so coincidental anymore. It's has to be forced and scheduled to some extent. But I would say folks just have to be really proactive about it, way more than normal even, to put time on folks' calendars and just ask them. And I would say do that across the organization, not just within the departments. There's a lot to learn from folks who you aren't just typically interacting with in the day-to-day. So you might discover completely new areas of work that are super interesting, or other kinds of projects that you can plug into. So that kind of being proactive holds always, but I think is especially important now.
Yeah, I agree with everything everyone said. I should mention that in addition to sort of the informal group interchange at lunches, we do have staff meetings of larger groups within our office, and part of what goes on there is people reporting on their current activities. And so our Stanford fellow would be invited to attend, listen in, take part in those meetings, and if a topic comes up that's of interest to her, obviously we would encourage her to reach out directly. One other thing we do, and I'm embarrassed to say I'm not sure how that's going to work this particular summer, but starting a few years ago, we're one office within a larger organization, and so we have sort of an agency-wide summer fellow or intern superstructure as well that plans a variety of activities. One of the things we do is offer a so-called mentorship program, which is sort of an official connection between an intern and someone who is pointedly not in the same division or office or area within the agency that the fellow is working with primarily. And I hope we're going to be doing that this summer as well. But ultimately, I think there does have to be sort of the self-starter element, as George was quite properly indicating. You have to be self-confident and take the initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'll throw in a quick plug for the Stanford Alumni Network and the Stanford Alumni Mentorship webpage program, because in that instance where you're in an office within a larger organization, maybe you're not like in the same, well, you definitely won't be in the same physical space as some of these alumni this summer, but as a general rule, just having that position and sort of like being in that role can be a great way to make a connection with other Stanford alums that might be at the same organization. Our next question is, what are some typical intern mistakes that you see and how can students avoid them? We won't name any names.
I'll add one that we experienced one summer is I was never really that explicit about what the dress was at the work. And this is less different now that we'll be online, but I think you should be aware of it, that part of the work was the intern comes to the school district in San Francisco and sits with me. And then the other half of the time you're at Stanford or sitting in your apartment, right? And most of the time it just worked out that I said that, there's professional dress when you come to the district but be aware of what the culture is, and you should ask if you're not told, I know that seems less obvious online, but for example, it matters what you're wearing actually online, and then the background of your Zoom matters. And so you should be quite aware of that interaction if you're not already. And I would ask, it's something I would ask about, is what is the culture? Because the culture could be you just need your pajamas on, right? But the culture could be, no, you really need a collared shirt on. So I would ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Calling in from your bed is probably not the best first day move for anyone who is considering that.
So if I could add to that too, so I think one of the mistakes that we have uncovered, and then hence then we've added some training early on, was how do the fellows talk and ask questions from fellow colleagues. So we're all government employees, so you have this Stanford student coming in, or the Stanford fellow doing research or trying to identify improvements, and for county employees feel like, whoa, they're coming here to identify problems in my work or processes. So early on, because in our center, we work with people from the sheriff, from public defender, from probation, social services, behavioral health, medical, mobile, health and hospital. I mean, we have so many different agencies that work in our center that we depend on. And so in this particular case, this fellow was basically telling someone's like, well, that is your job, so I'm here to help you figure it out. And so it's like, no, you don't do it that way. So, so we worked it out, and at the end of the day, that person was their biggest fan, because they figured out, oh yeah, young and individual, first time working in an office setting. So so we early on do some training in terms of how do you talk to your peers or to other people, and how do you email folks, and not saying that you're there to identify the problems, but there to identify improvements.
Great, that's a great point. And actually, on that, touching on emailing folks, we kind of have like a follow-up to that is, how should students who may want to voice a concern do so in your organization? So they do see something they want to change, but how do you do that in a respectful, professional manner?
Well, in our county system, we have what's called just culture. So all county employees are encouraged to bring up issues, and in a very respectful way, but in a forum about improvements. And so we are now, we had, from the executives to mid-managers to line staff, there's been groups to assemble to do that, and all that has paused because it's so difficult to bring people together in meeting settings. So we are now more doing that with Zoom meetings. And so I'm going to encourage our fellow to be part of those conversations with others. And we have a consultant that's going to be helping us identify improvements in terms of our community workers working with our clients. And so it's those candid conversations at the end of the day, looking from the perspective of a client. And our fellow will be interviewing clients and bringing the voice of the clients to the table. So that will be a way of using his knowledge and interviews with clients to bring those conversations at meetings or at different forums.
Yeah, I would say our situation is slightly different, but still, I would suggest that the way to approach sort of a constructive suggestion is to first bring it up privately with your supervisor, because I think that your supervisor is less likely to feel or even be whatever patronized in the way that Javier's intern initially started out. And I think once that's been done, then it would be easy for the intern supervisor to say, oh, that's a great idea. Why don't you go and talk to so-and-so, or here's the way, let me suggest a way to present that suggestion that would have, so it would be as well received as possible and have a positive impact. But yeah, starting out privately is, I think, sort of a way of lowering the potential downside risk of being misunderstood or misperceived.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that just here at Haas, we have a huge emphasis on humility. And so that goes along with the idea of when you come into an organization, not assuming that, you know what's best because you took a class on it. And part of that is when a concern does come up, this is for students, is to frame your concern in terms of a question. So maybe wondering why something happened or why a certain action was taken, rather than being like, I saw this and I didn't like it. You tend to get a lot more out of conversations when you go from a place of like being inquisitive. So just a plug on that, always ask questions.
Yeah, so we had another question from an attendee. So Melissa earlier mentioned checking in with your previous internships and your previous supervisors. So this attendee is wondering, how would you like to see a fellow go about doing that? Are there any sort of like methods of communication or ways of staying in touch that have really impressed you or that are easiest or most convenient for you as supervisors?
This is on the so who's interned with us before? Is that what you're saying?
Right, yeah. So how to sort of stay in contact and keep that connection afterwards.
Oh, after. One way we did it was through LinkedIn. So making sure you're connected to whoever you worked on with LinkedIn. The other is just sending periodic updates or, job references. Hey, can you be my reference? The other, I would say, the third thing is, we mentioned earlier some students carrying over their work beyond the fellowship and carrying it into their schoolwork or their next job. And I would say that actually really helps you stay the most connected. And so almost every single fellow has done some sort of publication or blog post. We set them up at a different university or here or there to write about what they've worked on. And that's kind of kept us connected beyond that. And we felt we created more of an informal relationship by working on that post-fellowship.
So we always urge our interns to keep in touch with us in any way that they can or want to. We also get a lot of letter of recommendation requests, which we're generally happy to fulfill. Washington, D.C. is a place that people do tend to visit. So, we always urge people to let us know when they're in town and try and invite them to one of our lunches. It varies from year to year and from person to person. Last summer, we had two Stanford people, and as it happened, we had sort of a core group of 5 women, summer interns, who just really kind of gelled together and sort of formed their own community. And so we have an ongoing listserv or whatever where we keep in touch with them that way, not just the Stanford people, but others as well. And we still get visits from people who were interns like 10 or 15 years ago. They come back to us. And with particular reference to Stanford, one thing that we have benefited from, in particular, I'm sure some of you folks know Greg Roston, who teaches in the public policy program there at Stanford. And he was a colleague of mine many years ago at the FCC. And I think a good part of the reason why our continuing relationship with Stanford is so strong is because of Greg. But sort of he keeps in touch with the Stanford people who come here, and he's able, if they need it, to sort of connect a prospective summer fellow or fellow with someone who was there last year or the year before. So that allows them to get sort of a good but independent perspective on what it's like to work with us. And not that we need it, but it also maybe keeps us a little bit on our toes, because we know that there's going to be independent channels of communication about sort of what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, one really basic thing is like follow the organization on social media, keep up, be on the newsletters and that kind of thing. Just keep up with the work as much as you can. But Jonathan, actually, your comment made me also think there's an opportunity to, from the student side of things on sort of the campus side, invite folks in who maybe they worked with over the summer to events at Stanford, or things that Stanford is running remotely or in person, and that just helps there be a better and better sort of reciprocal relationship between the organization and the school, both for that individual person and deepening the relationship, but for future professors, students, staff members, etc. I think we just have very close relationships with a couple of schools where there's a number of different ways that we work together. It's not simply hosting interns, but it's there's probably 4 or 5 different ways that we actually partner. And so I think those deeper university relationships can be really helpful for us as well.
And if I may add too, I think when the students go back to school, they've taken some courses that there are some related to the work we do. And so like a lot of political science, law classes, and then there was a professor, Jennifer Abernethy. She teaches a class on bias and just injustices. So we've been able to, some of the students have taken that class and then shared their research and knowledge with us that we could then apply it in terms of our practices or policies. And then recently we had a team through the law school, the policy lab, a group of 8 students did some work with us this past quarter. And so then I connected them with our fellows. So they're going to finish their work, which is just it's all about how do we make sure our clients can register and apply for services online. So instead of coming actually to our center, but doing everything online. So it's just the timing is just perfect. So seeing those opportunities and connecting them to other programs, I think that's very beneficial.
Yeah, I'll just add that for Cardinal Quarter Fellows, you'll be invited at the end of the summer, assuming that this still happens this year, to present your research at the Symposium for Undergraduate Research in Public Service. And once you've done that, it takes very little extra effort to snap a photo of you in front of your board or your presentation and then send it off to your supervisors or people that you worked closely with at your organization, just to say, hey, look, here's the product of some of the work I did over the summer, and I'm, excitedly still pursuing this now that I'm back on campus. So,
yeah, awesome. So we have one more question for you, and then we have a couple more from the audience. And so from us is, what's your favorite part of being a supervisor?
I think for me is reminiscing on my time at Stanford and how they're adapting to their years, and what I learned and what I would have loved to have done when I was there. But then I think it's just the caliber of talent, and I think that's what I value the most as a supervisor, because it's all of our fellows that were ready to start doing the research, the communication. And they were very open to all the training and learning, and just fit really well with our staff. And also knew that if I was busy and I couldn't respond to them, they had other of my managers and staff that they could go to, and they felt comfortable doing that. So just acknowledging that I may not have the answers right away, but there's more other people in my staff that can help.
So, of course, the thing that initially brings the Stanford Fellows to us is work, and we're very, very happy to extract mass quantities of work from every one of them. But in terms of sort of what's most fun, well, things that are fun and rewarding, one, to observe someone gain and apply a new skill is very, very gratifying. And, there's not gonna, doesn't necessarily happen in sort of a blindingly clear way all the time, but sometimes it does, and that's extremely gratifying. But the thing that does happen almost every time that is gratifying and fun is just getting to know our fellows, interns, or whatever, as human beings, and learning about their non-work interests. And as I said, we spend a reasonable amount of time, not excessive, but a reasonable amount of time on, sort of, pop culture, politics, whatever, interpersonal relations, and getting a stream of new perspectives is we find that particularly gratifying. And our office is a very multi-generational office. I'm sort of on the downhill side of the distribution there, but we enjoy exchanging views kind of across perspectives and generations. And from a fun point of view, I'd put that at the top.
Awesome, thank you. So we have one more question from an attendee who's wondering about sort of pitching and having ideas for projects during the course of the internship, perhaps projects that sort of loop in other branches or divisions or departments in the organization. So this person is wondering how to sort of go about pitching that. Is that something that fellows should feel free to do, like through their supervisor, through sort of directly reaching out to the person whose work is most closely related to what they're thinking of doing? How would you sort of approach that as an intern?
I can answer this from our perspective. I would definitely rely on your supervisor. Hopefully, I mean, it sounds like this group does a great job supervising their fellow and will help them navigate the waters. I think almost all three of or four of our organizations are somewhat political and deal with politics and deal with authority, status, and power. And we have to address those issues when we're trying to introduce anything new. I think Javier explained it the best when he was trying to set some norms around suggesting new ideas and solutions, and that can be sensitive. So I would definitely work with your supervisor on that.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I would just remind people that we think very carefully before we offer a fellow position to anyone. And one of the things we think particularly hard about is, do we have enough substantive work for the person to do? And that determines how many interns we will be able to accommodate at a time. But we're not going to, we don't have sort of a week-by-week set of milestones for our interns. On the other hand, we do have projects and we do plan ahead. And so I think the expectation is that a substantial amount of our interns' time is kind of pre-committed to the operational tasks that we have we've set out for them. That said, we encourage open communication and speculation or whatever. So coming to the supervisor, I think, is exactly the right place to start. And to the extent that it's possible to integrate this new idea or new suggestion into the operational schedule of the intern, we're always happy to do that. And of course, if it turns out that it's a really good idea that can't really be pursued for reasons of time during the internship, we're happy to keep in touch and provide advice and support in terms sometimes of availability of people for conversations or interviews after the intern has left, advice on sources of data, facilitating access to data to pursue the project, even if it's not done while they're an intern at the FCC.
And on that, a student was wondering, so kind of what happens if you try to reach out to somebody maybe in a different division and they don't get back to you? So maybe you've tried several times. When do you just drop it, or do you go through a different avenue? Do you go to their boss? How do you navigate not getting an answer?
So I think in our, we have so many different divisions that come to our center and work on behalf of our clients. And then we go out in the community and work with different entities. So I always ask the fellow to draft like an introduction email so I could review it and I could easily send it to folks. And then and usually in the past, July and August is more, or especially July, a lot of our department heads and staff, they're on vacation. It's the slowest month. The board of supervisors is no longer there. That's not going to be the case this month. I mean, we're just basically on call at all times. But with what's going on and activation of our emergency operations center, a lot of my staff are now disaster service workers. And so the response will be much longer. And it's just the way it's happening now. And so I just have to let my fellows like, hey, we may not get that immediate response. And before we would be in meetings, so we could always, if you was trying to reach someone, you could always pull that person after the meeting and talk to them. Well, that's not the case. That could happen this summer. So we'll navigate and then figure out when it was the best time. But then if a student really wants to engage someone, I could always set up a meeting with that person for a different topic and just invite the student and say, oh, we also wanted to talk or have this, my fellows want to learn more about your organization. So we'll facilitate that.
Great. So as we kind of go into wrapping up, we wanted to give an opportunity for you all to maybe get any more tidbits out on how students may go about voicing concerns on a networking question, or even something that we've seen a lot from Haas come up as an issue is social media presence, especially, students have opinions. We're not sure if you have any particular experiences on that, but just any other last minute things that you feel like students should take into their experience.
I just really encourage the maintaining lines of communication. I love what Jonathan said about like the lunches and having the casual, but then you're going to have to, if you want to post things on social media or you want to publish things here or you want to go pursue this meeting, talk to your supervisor. Your supervisor is here to help you navigate this and should be attentive to you, hopefully. You can talk to your peers, but they're not going to help, like Javier said, like organize that meeting for you. And, if you're a big on Twitter or something, you can, they'll also be aware of like encouraging you what are proper guidelines in terms of what to post. Because like I said, most of these organizations that are on this panel are political, or you might be working for a private company. And you need to be quite sensitive to what you're doing for them for the summer. So I guess the hashtag is talk to your supervisor.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication and respect come up again and again. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think just one thing I agree with Laura, but also just be open-ended and be flexible, and just be ready just to ask. We have a huge campaign in our jails that says just ask. We invite the inmates to ask about their services when they leave, or bail, ask about everything, just ask. And I mean, I encourage my staff to also be part of that campaign and ask. And so it's because we learn from the fellows. And I think that's very important, is a two-way communication. And so don't be afraid to ask questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, George.
I think that's it brings up a really good point, Javier, and I think something that I've been thinking about a lot in the context of today and the past week, is how important dialogue is within organizations, bringing up difficult questions. Interns are like inherently at the bottom of power structures within organizations. And so I think it's really critical to voice if you feel like you aren't being treated fairly. Voice if you feel like you're not getting opportunities for any reason, your gender, your race, whatever it might be. Those are really, really important things, and organizations are working through how to make sure that those types of issues are raised and treated fairly. And I know lots of entities don't do a great job of responding to that, but it is really, really important for folks to be raising those kinds of concerns and issues. And I think we all want to be at organizations that take those kinds of things seriously. And so that's one thing that I we were all interns once, right? We all went through that experience, and we want to make sure that the organizations that we are representing and the experiences that we're giving for interns are positive and continue to get better and better as the years go on, and we continue to learn. And we learn best from getting that feedback, even if it's hard feedback. And systems improve when they're pushed back on. So encourage everybody to go in with that kind of mindset into the summer as well.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, that was a really excellent closing remark. I hope that everyone in the audience at home will join me in mentally thanking our panelists who took the time to be here. Your experience as former and future supervisors is so invaluable to all of our fellows who are preparing for an internship in sort of chaotic and constantly changing times. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it from everyone at the Haas Center. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jackie and Melissa. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much.
Have a pleasant day then.
You too.
Yeah. Bye.
Goodbye.